I was going to recommend something to start this video, but I just want to level with the audience for a second. These videos are the easiest thing I do. I've been making YouTube videos since 2008, and for a long time nobody cared. It took 15 years of making videos that nobody watched to get to where I am right now, and I still don't understand why I suddenly have support. Nobody cared about the music that I cranked away at for months at a time. Nobody cared about the game prototypes that I put out over the years. Nobody cared about the artwork that I spent sleepless nights on. Nobody cared when I lost 200 pounds. Nobody cared when I stopped drinking and got sober. Even now, people come around here expecting me to change the videos and forego the only parts that I enjoy because they just want deep dives and documentaries. It's fucking lonely over here. Today, we're gonna take a look at Sunny Garcia surfing, Surfing H3O, and Transworld Surf for the PS2. Thank you to everybody who suggested these. I've had at least one suggestion for all of them, and to you guys, sorry that I took so long. Also, thank you to everybody who voted for this set in the last video. Let's get started. First up, Sunny Garcia Surfing, developed by Chrome Studios and published by Ubisoft in 2001. We've actually seen Chrome Studios once before. They were responsible for Disney's Extremely Goofy Skateboarding, also released in 2001. 1 year prior to both games, they were the development studio responsible for Championship Surfer. During my Goofy Skateboarding review, I mentioned that it felt like the team built that game with a deeper understanding of surfing and traditional sidewalk surfing than they did about skateboarding. So we're finally gonna see if my hypothesis is true. The director of development, John Passfield, has one of the most interesting careers I've seen in a while. He's done work as a writer, designer, programmer, director, and voice actor. He's served in multiple roles on seemingly every game he worked on, and I have tremendous respect for this kind of crazy work ethic. Here's a title I bet you've never heard before. The Enginographist, Daniel Eden, only has 2 other credits as a programmer on Ty the Tasmanian Tiger 1 and 2. In case you were wondering, Enginographist is not a real word, and Daniel Eden is the only person to ever be credited in that role for any reason. It really just means engine programmer. There is no real career mode here. Instead, the bulk of the game plays out over 2 slightly different modes. The first is Championship, which is essentially many pro skater style contests spread out over a tournament ladder. You have a limited amount of time and a limited number of waves, and if you fail to get a good enough score, the tournament is over. It's done in the style of classic racing games, so winning one tournament will unlock a harder difficulty until there are no harder difficulties left. I'm not entirely sure how the grading works, but I think it's a combination of your accumulated score and time spent on the wave. The next major game mode is Arcade. This is really just a series of high score runs, but if you fall down too many times, the run will automatically end. As you complete more of the game, you'll unlock different boards with different stats, as well as different riders with different stats, but I'm not really sure why, because there isn't any real difficulty to this game beyond some cheap shit. Arcade mode waves are all covered in these buoys and swimmers that run directly through the most active part of the wave in giant clusters. I mean, I like having obstacles in games, but this one probably could have taken a few of these out in favor of gradually increasing the difficulty as every stage moves forward. The gameplay here is mostly good, but not great. Holding forward before hitting a wave will do a paddling animation, and I specify animation because I am 99% certain paddling doesn't actually do anything. It doesn't move the player at all, and if it does, there's no indication that it does. Once you're in a good spot on the wave, pressing cross will do a takeoff, and the game does a decent job of calculating weak, regular, and late takeoffs. The left and right trigger are mapped to each corresponding hand, so they do the bulk of the trick work. You can carve on the face of the wave by holding square and sharp turning in a circle, and you can change the carve by holding one of the hand buttons. Once you're in the air, holding a hand button and pressing one of the face buttons will do a trick. Like Kelly Slater's Pro Surfer, you also get points for things like floating the wave narrow, riding inside of the top of the barrel, and carving in the splashdown. It's not very complicated, and the variety of tricks and things to do is much smaller than a lot of other games I've played, but to this game's credit, the cleanliness is great. It feels good to play, which is a far cry from Extremely Goofy Skateboarding. This confirms my theory that the team preferred and knew more about surfing than skateboarding. Visually, not bad. It's not even close to how good Kelly Slater's Pro Surfer looked, but it stands pretty strong. The rider models all look good, the locations and wave diversity is really good, and the tricks all look solid. The water itself is the thing that falls behind the most. It looks like it crawled right out of the DirectX 7 era, where textures were affine without any perspective mapping. Andre Lamothe wrote a great document called Texture Map Mania, and I want to read a little bit of that to explain what that means. An affine transformation means that it preserves quantities. Thus, as one image is mapped onto another and there is a one-to-one relationship, there is no warping. In the realm of texture mapping, affine mapping usually means throwing away the 3D information altogether and performing a simple 2D map. Perspective texture mapping, on the other hand, takes the z-coordinate of a 3D polygon definition into consideration, hence the perspective warping into consideration that occurs in a 3D space, and uses this information to perform the texture mapping in a more visually correct way. Sensei Lamothe has a really great way with words. The soundtrack, in traditional fashion, is a really good mix of licensed music meant to fit the surfing theme. There's some punk, some metal, some reggae, and a it's all mostly obscure stuff. It's not the biggest soundtrack in the world, it's as small as some of the AKA acclaimed sets, but it fits in really well. Finally, you know there had to be real-world footage. This is a likeness game based on real pro surfers, so they had to show them out doing what they do. Surfing is sort of the embodiment of freedom. You get out on the water and it's just you and the ocean working together to make this beautiful, harmonious thing happen. I've never been surfing, I've never been to the ocean, I don't know what it feels like. But I know it looks like people out living the best life they can. Life is too short for some bullshit, so chase the horizon and go do that thing you love. The most any of us can do is hope that we go down in the end without regrets. With all of that out of the way, I'll go ahead and give Sunny Garcia Surfing a rating of 6 out of 10. Don't get me wrong, I really want to give this one a higher rating because it is good for what it is, but there isn't a lot of game to play and it feels like it was made to come out a whole generation earlier. I can't blame the team for taking a few shortcuts because the timeline indicates that they were divided between this and extremely goofy skateboarding. I'm just grateful that this is superior to that in every single possible way. I recommend checking it out if you like surfing and you've never played it before. It can be good fun for a little while. Next up, Surfing H3O, developed by Opus and published by Rockstar and ASCII Corporation in 2000. If you saw the UFC Games video, then you already know who Opus is. They developed the original Ultimate Fighting Championship engine, and that engine was used in every single one of those 5 games. But there's one other credit that's much more interesting than this. Takayuki Suzuki, the director, co-planner, and co-programmer for this game, has a very long and astute career as a sound programmer and musician. No, you don't understand. When I say long and astute, I mean this dude programmed the Tetris music for the PC-88 and FM7 all the way back in 1988. Most recently, he served as the executive producer for Half Minute Hero 1 and 2, and there are 42 other games between those that he worked on over the decades. So this game was the brainchild of a real OG of video games. There is no career, same as last time. Instead, the idea is to surf your way through the competition tournament. When you win, you unlock more riders and higher difficulties. But why the fuck would anyone want to play this on a higher difficulty? Hands down, this is one of the most brainless games I've ever played, and it's presented in the most overcomplicated way possible. The idea is really simple. Collect a bunch of objects, do some tricks, and hit the finish line. It's really meet a certain score requirement. But the only way I could figure out how to do that was by going full collectathon mode. That meant mapping out routes specifically to pick up as many objects as I can because that's really all I could do. The gameplay is a whole lot of nothing, but caked with frustratingly bad controls and physics. Before you take off, you can paddle by alternating between the left and right bumpers. Then pressing both the right stick and left stick buttons simultaneously will send you into a takeoff. To turn left and right, you push up or down on the analog stick, which is super disorienting compared to the previous games. We can add discomfort to the discombobulation because the physics engine is horrible. There's a little speed meter at the bottom right of the screen that tells you how fast you're going, and it's a lie. I don't think it's physically possible for a surfboard to stall like a dead car when it's pointing toward the barrel exit. The reason it happens here is, get this, because of the wind. Yeah, that's right. Apparently the devs believed that regular wind is so fucking strong that it can negate the velocity of a surfer being propelled by the celerity of a breaking wave. It's very anti-Newtonian. Apparently, you can do tricks in this game by airing from the top of the wave, but touching the top of the wave will auto-bail pretty much every single time, so that system doesn't work. You can also apparently ride inside of the barrel, but there's never good enough speed to make that happen, so that system doesn't work. I think there's carving, but I couldn't figure it out. The only thing I can say confidently here is that Opus made really bad sports games. Their best games were the Half Minute Hero Duo, and their best product overall was Fluid, the audio workstation for the PS1. This isn't even close to the quality of those. I haven't played everything they've made yet, so maybe there's still some hope for them, but this is not a good indication. Visually, it actually looks really good, which is a shame because those great visuals are covering a shitstorm of bad gameplay. This game was developed using Renderware 3, which means RWX script was removed and the advanced editor features from Renderware 4 didn't exist yet. Every dynamic material had to be written in C++, which is substantially more complex in structure. There were dedicated Renderware API functions that made it a little easier than just raw dogging a completely new function with the standard library, but Renderware 4 didn't drop until 2005, so the graphics team was working with the earlier platform-dependent rendering toolchain. They did a great job, but it was a big limitation. Renderware was good, but the artists threw down 110% for this. The waves look crisp, clean, the rider models all look good, all the post-processing is nice, and the collectibles are charming. Again, it just really is unfortunate that these visuals were spent on less than stellar gameplay. The soundtrack is also good, just as small as the last one and not nearly as much variety, but still really good. It's a great mix of obscure punk that sounds like it would have fit in more appropriately with a skateboarding game. Honestly, Rockstar probably would have been a lot better off if they opted for Thrasher Skate and Destroy 2 instead of a surfing game. There was room for them in the action sports market, they had most of the right ideas, those ideas were just spent in the wrong place. Finally, there is real-world footage, and I have to commend Opus for this. Even though they didn't produce the greatest sports games, they consistently tried to show proper respect for the real athletes that keep these sports relevant. They could see the value in real life and how inspiring it was for the player to be able to see that real life. It keeps players interested in the game by giving them a framework of ideas to mimic, and it pushes other players to go out and actually try surfing for themselves. Life is really short, and even the teams who couldn't pull a great game almost always tried to encourage us to go out and live. I respect that. With all of that out of the way, I'll go ahead and give Surfing H3O a rating of 4 out of 10. It's not unplayable, but it isn't that good. The gameplay itself falls so short of every other aspect that it's kind of depressing. It's such a far cry from the surfing games I've played already. There was an obvious want to make a fun game with unique and original ideas, but unfortunately those ideas are the thing that drag it down the most. It's sort of like a souffle that fell in the oven right when it was about to be perfect. There wasn't a good established foundation for 3D surfing games by that point, so it's fair to say that nobody really knew what a good proper surfing game looked like yet. But after this, I'm pretty sure the consensus was, this ain't it, Chief. I still recommend checking it out, if only for the fact that it's a surfing game published by Rockstar. But definitely don't expect to have an amazing experience or anything. It can be really frustrating. Last up, Transworld Surf, developed by Angel Studios in 2001, 2002, and 2003 for the Xbox, PS2, and GameCube respectively. If you've never heard of Angel Studios before, then maybe you've heard their alternative and much more well-known name, Rockstar San Diego. They don't really need an introduction, but they're the team responsible for the Midnight Club series, the Red Dead series, LA Noire, and Max Payne 3. Funny enough, Transworld Surf wasn't even published by Rockstar, it was published by Infogrames under Atari. The lead designer, Daryl Komodo, is something of a fucking legend. His pedigree at Neversoft includes games from Tony Hawk, Guitar Hero, and Call of Duty, with a few other interesting games mixed in. Given the experience of everybody involved, I'm really hoping this one is better than the last one. The career here is definitely the best of the set. In traditional fashion, go from map to map completing goals to move on. The goals themselves are the standard variety of score, photo op, destructible, collectible, and specific trick or distance stuff. But this is the best career of any surfing game I've played so far. In each map, you can call a jet ski to pull you to one of a few different waves on the same body of water. The waves themselves range from calm to hazardous, and there are specific challenges associated with each. There's a lot more variety and freedom here than there has been in any surfing game I've covered so far. There are also standard graded contests in similar fashion to pretty much every other tech fantasy action sports game. The formula works. I mean, there's just something about it. It just works this way. The gameplay here is all of the standard surfing stuff, like floating the top of the wave, riding in the barrel, carving, paddling in, and the occasional obstacle to avoid. As far as the air tricks go, it's pretty much just SSX on a surfboard. Grabs can be done with different combinations of the bumpers and triggers, and you can modify those grabs with the left face button. The physics feel way better than the other games, by a long shot. The slope of each wave actually feels Newtonian, meaning the gravity is proper and the speed is never unreasonably fast or slow. Much like Kelly Slater's Pro Surfer, getting a combo just means nailing the next trick as fast as you can, and not repeating tricks immediately. Overall, it's very comfortable to play. Visually, it's a lot more dynamic than every other surfing game I've played, and I appreciate that. It could have just been the exact same water with a slightly different height and shape and maybe some rain or cloud once in a while, but there is actual design to each of the maps, including different obstacles, pools of sharks, other surfers, and varying water textures. It's actually really impressive how much effort went into ensuring that it wouldn't just be the same repetitive shit all the way through. The soundtrack is great, made of obscure and mainstream punk, reggae, and a few other things, but the best thing about it is that it's fucking huge. At a whopping 70 songs, this is the biggest soundtrack of any game I've played to date. Better still, a chunk of them are also available in the Amped soundtrack, so some of it is familiar. Yes, I have been working on Amped, it's just taking a while. All in all, solid music choices from every game in the set, and this is a great set list to finish with. Finally, there is a massive variety of real-world surfing footage, but totally unrelated, there's also a great variety of skateboarding footage. I'm not sure why, but I'm glad it's there. A few times in the past when I've talked about life, I've had a few smartasses be like, "Who are you to tell anybody to go touch grass?" And it really isn't for you, it's for me. It's to remind myself that I've lived a lot of life and there's still a long way to go. It's the only thing that prevents me from completely falling apart. Without my positive attitude, I'm just another depressed kid that came up in the fatherless economic recession era. So I don't give a fuck if anybody wants to hear it. This is for me. Life is really short, so remember to go out and enjoy it once in a while. At the end of everything, I'll go ahead and give Transworld Surf a rating of 9 out of 10. It's It's the best surfing game I've played so far, and it's one of the best tech fantasy games I've played overall. It's a real gem. If I had played it when I was a young kid, I would be way more interested in surfing than I am now. It does a lot of great things, even if it isn't totally original. It's comfortable to jump into, it didn't take a lot of time to learn, and it's never so punishing or difficult that it gets frustrating. Normally, I would have a lot more to say, but this game in general has one very simple descriptor that fits. It just works. Everything about it just works. It's one that I'll be glad to come back to when it finally gets retro achievements, and it's one that I'm glad I played. I recommend checking it out if you're into tech fantasy games, surfing, board sports, what have you, the whole lot of jargon. Now that I'm done with all of that, I think it's finally time to talk about the Pride Fighting Championship game. I've gotten a couple of requests for that now, and apparently it's very similar to the UFC games I talked about, so now is as good a time as any. I've been putting off a few of the Tony Hawk games, and I don't want to keep thinking about them like unfinished business, so I'll take a look at one of those after that. I haven't been in a great mood lately, so the upload rate probably won't be as rapid fire as it has been a few times before, but I'll get it done. I always do. Until next time, thank you, and have a nice day.